everybody, this is Mike Van Meter, and this episode of Recovery is Possible is brought to you by Retreat Behavioral Health, where there are endless possibilities for recovery. Retreat provides quality care at their leading mental health and substance use treatment centers, which are designed to offer patients truly personalized and comprehensive programs that are tailored to their needs. Retreat substance use and mental health treatment centers in Palm Beach County, Florida, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and New Haven, Connecticut do everything in their power to ensure that patients receive the highest quality treatment in a safe and comfortable setting. So reach out today at retreatbehavioralhealth.com or call at 855-802-6600 for more information. And today, guys, I want to talk to you about tapping into your energy in recovery. And there are lots of things in our life that can just sap that energy from us. And remember, some of the things that we want to avoid in recovery is derived from the acronym HALT. And HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. Those are the things that we want to avoid. And that last part is being tired. And we want to make sure that we're very careful with our energy levels and having those energy levels sapped. And so we want to ensure that our energy levels in recovery are not disrupted too much. And so that's what we're talking about today in this particular episode of Recovery is Possible. And Aparna Sain, who's been on the show before, and I talk about that, tapping into that energy in recovery, how to keep it maintained, and really avoiding the things that take it away from us. So with that, I know you're going to enjoy this episode, and please share this with anyone in your life that needs to be in recovery, is in recovery, or maybe family members that are struggling with those that are suffering from an addiction. So here we go. This is an interview between Aparna Sain and myself. All right, here we go. Days, it's important because I can get triggered. I can get triggered by a patient who, even with the knowledge that I have that this person came to the hospital, they're sick, they need help. But you know what? I'm a human and I can get triggered as well. So with that, Aparna, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me. I feel like I'm a regular now on Recovery is Possible. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Well, you are.
Yeah, thanks. And we, it's always nice to be able to explore some of these new concepts and topics. I think that, as I was talking about earlier with this, is one of the things we want to explore within ourselves is that feeling of wholeness. So wholeness is something that I feel that it's a little misunderstood, because wholeness from a yogic standpoint is when we are able to balance all of our energies. So all dimensions of ourselves, including the driven self, the type A or whatever type you may be, but all of those energies of doing, going out there, getting, letting, all of that. In addition to that, we're able to balance that with some of our subtler energies, things like what we call the more feminine energies, the softer, the creative, the heart-based energy. So being able to balance that mind, the heart, the body, the spirit, all four dimensions of being a human being. And the spiritual side is also a very important component to that. So being able to really be humble around something larger than ourselves, right? So all of that balance is what creates wholeness. And wholeness is where our true energy resides. Because if we're off balance, just like I had experienced a lot of pain on the right side of my body for most of my life. So I didn't really, it was so dull, but it was always there. And it wasn't until I started living in a spiritual center called an ashram in India that I realized that there are ways to fix that, or there's a way to be without it. And then I realized, wow, there's a whole part of me that is totally untapped. And then once I figured that out, it was just like a whole, there was a spiritual awakening, but it was also one of the parts of my spiritual awakening was to discover that I can live pain-free and I can live like a whole being. And it just gives me so much more energy, so much more even intellect, creativity, intuition, and heart and caring and all of these subtle things that I was missing out on all my life. So it was a very, very powerful change. So much so that I kept going back and decided to become a teacher of some of this, because I thought, it was a huge awakening for me. And it changed my life completely. And now I've learned all this, and I think every human being should be able to operate at a wholeness level. Because in yoga, we say that there's so much energy that is untapped, that we're only tapping about like 10 to 15% of who we really are on a day-to-day autopilot operation system that we're on.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. So you're absolutely right. And so in recovery, what we do when you look at the steps in steps 4 and 5, steps 4, we do this very thorough searching of ourselves, right? And again, I'm talking from an AA 12-step perspective, but whatever recovery program you decide to take, there's going to be a version of this searching, to this moral and searching inventory of yourself. And we talk about taking that spotlight to our life and looking at everything about us. And you'll notice in recovery that we spend a lot of time looking at those things that upset us. Because remember what I said, the number one reason why people relapse is resentments, okay? And so when we break that down and you work with a sponsor or a spiritual advisor, whoever you're working, a trusted person, and you go through that and you look at what upsets you, but more importantly, why does that upset you? Why is it affecting your sense of security? Is it affecting your ego? Is it affecting your maybe you had been bullied growing up, and now as an adult, there's that person reminds you of that incident that was never addressed and you never dealt with, and now as an adult, it's affecting you. But the essence of recovery is really understanding yourself, and that's what the 12 steps are about. And step 5 is sharing that with another person, and then looking for the character defects that we have, and then in our world asking our higher power to remove those character defects from ourselves. But a lot of what you talk about ties into that, and because the question is, why is it important that we do these things? The reason why it's important is because that affects everything else. It affects our energy. If I'm like this week, I had this patient that I think this patient, because of the condition that she was in and the particular diagnosis that she has, she's one of those people that has become a master at whoever she's around, finding those vulnerabilities. That's the only way I can describe it. Or those hot points with each person she knows.
The triggers.
And then just poking at it. And we as counselors, we're human beings too. And after a while, it just gets to you. And then it gets into your skin. And I will tell you that most of this week, and particularly the night of, when we had these things happen, that was the first time I walked out of the hospital like I was angry. And the next day I was still angry. But here's the difference. In recovery and, where I'm at sort of spiritually and where I'm at, I will say I recognize it. I recognize that imbalance. But it was a definite imbalance. And what I need to do now is explore why was I thrown into that imbalance. And then the biggest part of that is, and especially in recovery for everybody that's listening, how do I get back to that sense of equilibrium? And maybe you can help us with that.
And I think that's a really good example, because we all have our triggers, I had something that triggered me this week as well. And what I love about what you just said is we all will be triggered. That is just the way nature and the world allows us to grow. And so we should be, in yoga, we say we should be thankful. Like, that is a teacher that's shown up for you, because that
it's an interesting way of looking at it.
Right? Yeah.
I wasn't feeling that at the time.
Exactly. And I had the same thing, because I was triggered by something that happened to me this week. And I was like, really? I thought you had worked through all of this, right? But that's a teacher. Right, so we say, because we're afraid to use the word guru because there could be all kinds of connotations, but really that's what it is. It's your guru, the teacher that showed up at that point. So that person who triggered you showed up and gave you an opportunity to grow. So grow from that to, and how we process it, and sometimes it takes longer than we think. It goes beyond just being able to say, oh, okay, well, this was my growth experience. Okay, sometimes you have to go deeper within yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And see what is it that there's, what was it? There was a psychologist that talked about this as the shadow selves. So something in one of your shadows got triggered. Mm-hmm. And then that shadow, is still there. So it brought it to the surface. So it's your chance to now process it and grow beyond it. And then that's how you get to the equilibrium.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And I think in recovery, I mentioned that this person came to our unit, is in the hospital. If she, look, you don't go to the hospital because you're well, right? The reason why you go to the hospital is because you're not well.
Unless you work there, yeah.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I guess, as we're talking about that, I guess that's kind of debatable too.
Yeah,
right? We all need help
true.
in our own ways. But the thing is that this person clearly is not well, which demonstrates that, in all of our lives, and if you're listening, remember, I'm giving you this example at work and you're giving an example, but we all have those people in our lives. You don't have to work in a hospital to have people that will trigger you, and that this happens every day. And that's the art of recovery, is dealing with this, because every single day, I mean, as you know, I'm running for a political office right now. I'm triggered by people it's like a job.
You
should
be
my
thankful.
Job.
Now you're growing and growing and growing, and And
you know what? And actually, as I'm sitting here talking to you, maybe, because so I had an intern experience, and when I was an intern, I worked at a treatment center for a year, and I do have to say there were a couple of patients that got to me, but I'm learning and doing it. I will say, as I've gotten into the profession and have been working in the field, this was really the first time it's sort of a person triggered me. But as I sit here and I think about it, and now, as I'm running for office, it's pretty much just a daily beatdown. I will, anybody out there thinking about running for a political office, I really do think you need to work on centering yourself, because it is a monumental beating. It's probably not for everybody to do. And if you're not in some sort of a program where you can balance yourself and work on yourself, it's probably not a healthy thing to do. It's not healthy to do, period. But the reason why I say this is, as I think about it, and I have this woman that triggered me, I have been going through weeks, months now, of a constant sort of spiritual attack on me. And as sensitive people, it's when you have people that, if you're running for a political office, nearly everything that comes out of your mouth is criticized by somebody, right?
Exactly.
Now, but I think that kind of wears you down, and it makes you vulnerable. And that might have been part of it too, is I'm kind of in a vulnerable state because I don't have many people saying positive things to me on a daily basis. And so maybe addressing that is, so if you're working in the corporate world, or if you're working in an office, maybe whatever your profession is, we do go through those periods where you're maybe under much more stress than you normally are. Because after all, right, it's easy for me to sit and meditate and eat healthy and exercise and take care of myself when I don't have a whole lot going on.
Exactly.
But that's not how life is.
Right.
And we're not, you are going to have life. So the challenge is going to be, how do you keep that balance and do the things that you talk about, particularly on your show, when life's not going well and life is hard, which is really when we need it the most, right?
Exactly. And the first thing we can do is what you did, which you recognize, okay, there's something in me that needs to shift, because there is that shadow lurking around that I need to be aware of, right? That it was brought up to the surface. You or me, I had the same thing where I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is still triggering me. What is it that I need to process? But one of the things I love in the 12-step process, that I think it's in the 12-step process, but even in a lot of spiritual practices, we do this, is this whole thing around journaling and writing, right? So what happens is...
We encourage that.
Yeah.
We definitely encourage that.
Even in the spiritual practice. So one of the things that I personally recommend people do is really talk to that part of ourselves, right? So there is let's say it's your childlike self, or it's somebody else, right? It's easier when it's someone else, right? So someone else triggered you. Write out what bothered you about this experience, and then write a counter note to that person and say, because that person showed up as your teacher. So it's like, thank you for being here, for I learned that I am still triggered by this experience. And it's like,
that's
all
a great
the things that are negative about it, write it out. Because one of the things that I don't like a lot of people say is everything that you're writing should be positive. And I don't believe in that. I used to carry around a journal that I used to call bitching, actually. And because when I first began this journey of offloading myself, I felt like there was just so much coming up, and it wasn't pretty. But it was like, it needs to be voiced, right? So I don't want to create more shadows or give voice to my shadows. So I actually created a journal called Bitching, and I would just sit there and I would just write and write and write and write. Every day I used to do this for a while until I kind of could get over some of the big things that continually kept bothering me. And it's a good practice to go back to. So when we are triggered, the way I process it is through some of the writing. Because if I come here and say to you, well, just sit in meditation, it'll all be better. Well, I don't know that that's going to happen because we're not quite that savvy. We're not in a ashram sitting in a spiritual center where we can just retreat and go away from everything, right? So if it's that you can't reach that, well, you can still come back to offloading some of the things that are still there. Never let it just sit there. Never push it aside, which a lot of people do.
Because it grows, that negative part of that will grow.
Exactly. Or even the people who say the power of positive thinking, well, don't worry about it. No. Don't, because that I think was the mistake I was making early on in my practice because I came to this journey through meditation. I thought everything needs to be beautiful at all times. And whenever something ugly came up, I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe this is coming up. No, I need to go back to meditation. Well, it wasn't working out for me. There was just too much anxiety created in my body and I wasn't getting anywhere. That's when I started this whole bitching journal thing. And I know I'm not supposed to be using those words, but it's just that's what it was. That's what I called it. And I just let it rip. I would just talk about everything that was upsetting me about this situation or this person and put it out there. And then you can burn it or you can do whatever you want with it. But you've actually allowed that voice of that part of yourself to be heard. And that's all sometimes we need. Right? Because at first I was like, okay, and then what's next? And what's next with this? Right? So if you're angry, you want to kind of be like, do the next thing to kind of take that on and move past it. But sometimes just letting it be, and then you can do a practice of maybe going for a walk or meditation or a yoga. Yoga is a really asana based, like postures are very good for moving through some of that unresolved anger through the body. But I recommend really voicing whatever's bothering you.
Yeah, it's important because when we keep this energy, this negative energy tied up in our body, and it wasn't until I was older, and I really wish many of the subjects that we talk about were things that I had known when I was younger, when I started out in my career, right?
Me too.
I'm now retired from my career, the bulk of my career, and the profession I was in was very, very, very stressful. I mean, we used to joke that what we saw in one day would put most people in therapy for the rest of their lives, but we were doing it every day but we were doing it every day for 20 plus years. And it's not good. I mentioned on your program that the average life expectancy of a police officer in the United States after retirement is 5 years. And
that's
if you
scary.
think that is very scary, and if you're a first responder and you're listening to me, it is very, but it doesn't have to be that way. But I think that what happens is this trauma that I talked about, and you don't have to be a first responder. I mean, many people go through horrific experience and have a lot of trauma in their life. If you're homeless, if you're suffering from mental illness, maybe you're living with somebody that's going through that. It creates a lot of tension and stress. And I think we downplay the energy because we are beings of energy. You talk about this quite a bit. These energies that we have in our lives, it can be positive, can be negative. And we know that the negative energy, when it's just constant, and if it's not dealt with, manifests itself in many ailments, diseases, strokes, heart attacks, all these types of things. That energy has to be released and be replaced. And you have to find ways of for your longevity of dealing with this and releasing that energy. And we're talking about it. And maybe Aparna, maybe you can talk about the different tools that people can utilize. And I know in the field that I come from, the idea of meditating, yoga, all of those types of practices were really not looked upon well in my field because it's such a masculine field that I come from. It was, how do we deal with it? We drink it. Just go. That's why drinking is so prevalent. Numb it down. Just don't feel it anymore. And traditionally, that's been what's been done. Now, I will say that in the last probably 5 to 8 years, there's a real movement afoot in the military and in law enforcement in particular of recognizing the damage of that and at least providing education and tools to deal with it differently. We're not there yet. We've not fully developed that in these fields. But you talked about journaling. You talk about meditation. You talk about yoga. How do you take somebody like me or somebody in my field? What would you say to somebody that is just like, that is just so not feminine, weak, weak people do that, to somebody that's just kind of a hard-bitten person. The alpha male. How do you convince somebody like that to practice these things? Because I do know, and I swear to you, I'm probably only alive today because I've adopted some of these practices. Not quite the way that you have, although you're a good teacher and a role model, but I've at least begun that journey. But how do we get people to begin that journey?
That's a really good question because and people will surprise you. So one thing I will say is I actually teach yoga at Gold's Gym, and the particular gym that I teach at is full of bodybuilders, right? So people that are very into building their muscles. I don't know if they're professional bodybuilders, but they really like to have real pumped up muscles and stuff. And so I used to teach a Sunday morning class where a lot of these men used to show up with those real big muscles and stuff like that, and they would come for their stretch. And I don't teach power yoga. That is not the yoga I teach. I just teach yoga postures like hatha and other things, but it really is about connecting with the heart space. And so what happened, which surprised me, was I thought, I usually used to do a lot of talk about connecting with our heart space and some of the subtler energies within the body, and I do a whole stretch routine around that towards the end. One day I skipped it, or a couple of times I tried to skip it because I was tired, and I was like, these people don't really care. They just want to do their yoga because they're such strong men. Well, some guys came up to me after the class and they said, hey, all that stuff that you do, I don't know what you call it, but I know it makes me feel good. And I was so shocked, right? Because these are really built men, and I didn't think they really cared. I thought I was just ranting about the heart and how you need to connect with the body. And basically all we're doing is dropping down from our head and really connecting with the body in a very wholesome way. Like you're connecting with the heart's energy, you're connecting with love, and some of these emotions that you can feel within our body, dropping into it. And I thought they didn't really care. Meanwhile, every single time that I was too tired to really go through that, they always pointed that out to me. They were like, I don't know what it is, but it feels good, and I want that stuff back. So just remember that. And so each time I was brought back to the fact that sometimes we think that the type A, and actually I taught meditation. This is a really good example to your point in the Army. So I taught a group of Army people meditation, and I could really feel how much fear was in the room because they had that one person who's like commander or sergeant or whatever the title is in charge, and then the rest of the people, you could feel the amount of fear there is to be in the presence of this man. And I pick up on energy, and I thought, okay, we're just going to release this through meditation, right? Because you can't do anything verbally. So we did that, and the person who kept coming back to me for more and more was the leader, or the real tough guy at the top, who I was shocked. I definitely, my goal was to touch his heart in a way that he will never forget it. And I actually think I succeeded because I kept getting an email from him saying, oh, you should come back and do this, come back and do that. He even sent me a certificate of appreciation, mailed it to me.
Wow.
And so people have surprised me every step of the way on this, whether it's men, mostly it's been men that are really, once you get a feel for what it is that it feels like, then you always keep wanting to come back to that. It's like, how do I get there? Because that's how it was for me. I was too type A to listen to anybody. But once I felt that, that inkling of something so beautiful that I couldn't express in words, that I was like, how do I go back to that? And I kept chasing that. I mean, we can't really chase it, but we're just like, how do I go back to that? And then it becomes easier over time. So I guess my long answer is that really finding practices that allow us to tap into some of the subtler energies. A lot of men say to me it's the women in their life that help them get to that, right? And then they end up marrying those women, by the way. Some women, that is a really, if you are a woman who's dialed into your feminine energy, it's a very good way to keep that man hooked. Because they think that you are the path to that kind of subtle. And it is true, right? If you live with someone who's very connected to their feminine side, it just kind of feels good. They're on a different wavelength.
And they're comfortable with it.
And it makes you feel comfortable. And so, so there are people out there in our lives, or there are practices. But one good practice to start on our own is just to actually connect with our breath. Right? Even if you're just being aware of how you're breathing in this moment. So you just now kind of connected to something way subtler than your head.
And like what happened this week, and you being triggered and me being triggered, I think that's something that I'm trying to work on. And I think we should always have something like about us, in our wellness, our spiritual wellness, our physical wellness, all these types of things that we should always be working on. And I will say that the one thing I've learned is that this week I was very aware that I was triggered, and then emphasize that the ideas that we're talking about here, your spirituality, your energies, you're taking care of yourself, you're working out, just taking care of yourself. I can't emphasize this enough. In those times of stress, that's when you should really emphasize that in your life. But and I'm speaking from experience that whenever things have gone off the rails, so to speak, in my life, that's when I do these things the least. When in reality, I should be doing it the most.
Well, congratulate yourself on the fact that you didn't reach for the bottle.
Yeah,
right? Because that's what most people do, and we're used to doing that, is reaching for that feel good, right? That chocolate bar, the alcohol, or the plant-based medicine, or whatever else people are using to numb themselves out again, right? And it's like, oh my God, I can't handle it. So I think that the fact that you are so grounded in your recovery process that you didn't even think to reach for the alcohol, right? So that's a huge step.
Yeah.
But then the other step is, some of the other practices. And because there's such an assortment of practices, I don't want to say, oh, you must always reach for this one thing. No. Pick the thing that you like. Because it could change.
Because if you like it, you'll continue to do it.
Yeah. I mean, if it's something simple as going for a walk, do that. Take a walk. But if you're going to do the walk, I say make sure you're really aware of how you're breathing in that walk. You're not just like because one thing we do, I know I do this a lot, is if I'm on a negative thought pattern, I'm still chasing that negative thought unless I bring it myself back.
It's a circular thing.
And it just keeps going in my head. So even if I'm walking, it's still going in my head. And then I'm like, wait, I'm just wasting my time. It's still processing that negative thought, creating negative emotion. So you got to be aware of what's happening. And then you got to get out of that negative thought, I will say, is challenging unless you come back to some breathing, some centering. I've seen people do this at the gym, and I actually am becoming a big fan of this. If you're really, really triggered, reach for these things I've seen these bodybuilders use that is like a big ball that's kind of heavy, and they just hit it to the ground. And I've done that before, and I have to say, it feels really good. I just explored it
Don't
recently.
hit a person.
Yeah, right? You're not hitting it. And I've seen these guys like go at it, hitting the wall, hitting the floor, and there are all these noises. And I used to wonder why they're doing it until I did it myself, and I realized, wow, this is a really good way to process that anger.
Yeah, just lifting weights in general.
Yeah, lifting weights is a good way.
Releasing that energy, and going for a long run, whatever it is that you do, bike ride, whatever the case may be, but being aware of it and then releasing that energy, that negativity. And when you get triggered, it's always important to remember too that we are not the only ones that need help. When you are dealing with someone that has issues, it's always important to remember that they have issues, and try not to make their issues your issues. We're all on a journey. We're all here. we're all trying to get better, and you may, in fact, be in a better place than these other people. And always remember that they may not be well either, and try to have grace on others like we have on ourselves. So with that, Aparna, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. And thank you for
great.
inspiring me. I realize now that I need to do more and more of what, sharing some of this, because I do think this is one of the most important things of being able to be a better human.
And how can we contact you?
So you can reach me on my website, www.aparnasain.com, or you can reach me at mindfulnationradio@gmail.com. Thanks so much, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. And this is WERA 96.7 here in Arlington, Virginia. Guys, recovery is possible. If you try, work at it. Work because it works. We'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye. So that was my interview with Aparna Sain on tapping into your energy in recovery. And I know that there is a lot of tools for all of you out there that need to be in recovery, or those that are living with those that need to be in recovery, because it can sap your energy as well. So please take these tools, spread them to anyone that you think that needs this information, that would benefit from it. I think in a lot of ways we can all benefit from this information, whether you're in recovery or not. And again, folks, this episode of Recovery is Possible is brought to you by Retreat Behavioral Health, where there are endless possibilities for recovery. Retreat provides quality care at their leading mental health and substance use treatment centers, which are designed to offer patients truly personalized and comprehensive programs that are tailored to their needs. Retreat substance use and mental health treatment centers in Palm Beach County, Florida, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and New Haven, Connecticut do everything in their power to ensure that patients receive the highest quality treatment in a safe and comfortable setting. So reach out today at retreatbehavioralhealth.com or call at 855-802-6600 for more information. And with that, guys, I look forward to seeing you next time. Please spread this message far and wide. Recovery is possible if you work it. So get to work. I'll talk with you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.